Today, we are going to take a look at how you can roleplay a Tiefling, one of the lesser common species of Dungeons & Dragons games, but a playable species all the same, as per the 2024 Player's Handbook, which has been out for a few months now. This video, and all of the videos like it, are here really to help you separate out your non-human species, because obviously we are humans as we're playing D&D, and so we relate to humans and we kind of default to human behavior. But some of these species that you would play in a D&D game are very distinctly non-human, and this video is about trying to make your Tiefling stand out rather than just being a human with horns, essentially. So we're going to cover what the Player's Handbook tells us about Tieflings. We're going to cover how that is represented mechanically, and we're also going to cover my favorite bit, which is 10 questions you can ask yourself to really get into the mind of your Tiefling and how they may very well appear in the game and allow you to roleplay a Tiefling so that it does stand out from being different to a human with horns. What does the Player's Handbook tell us about Tieflings? First of all, Tieflings are either born in the lower planes, and for those that are unfamiliar, the lower planes are basically those planes of existence that represent evil. So they are either born in the lower planes or they have ancestors who originated there, suggesting that they may be directly descended from fiends of some kind. Their heritage comes from devils, demons, or other fiends. This heritage directly influences both their physical and magical traits, and possibly even, which we'll come to later, their personality a little bit. So a Tiefling's connection to the lower planes, here we are, much as I was saying about personality, the Tiefling's connection to the lower planes does not dictate their morality. They are able to choose how they wish to embrace or reject that legacy. Okay, and that is explicitly called out in the 2024 Player's Handbook. There are 3 Fiendish legacies. There is the Abyssal legacy, the Chthonic legacy, and the Infernal. The Abyssal Tieflings. These are drawn to the chaos of pandemonium, the entropy of the abyss, and the despair of Karsuri. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce this one, I must admit. Karsuri. I'm going to go with that. So they have demonic ancestry. They have the blood of demons in their veins. Demons, how you separate demons from devils. Both are considered evil. Demons much more embrace chaos. They just want to destroy everything, basically. Devils are much more lawful evil. They are the ones that like those infernal contracts. Those are the ones that have rank and hierarchies, whereas demons, it's much more kind of a free-for-all, just obliterate everything. Common physical traits of abyssal tieflings, so these demonic ones, they might have horns, fur, tusks, and peculiar scents. Chthonic tieflings are influenced by Karsuri, Gehenna's greed, and the gloom of Hades. These are all lower planes that are being referenced here, which you can look up in the Dungeon Master's Guide, the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide. Their ancestry is linked to neutral evil fiends. So you have demons that are chaotic, devils that are lawful, and then you have neutral evil fiends, such as night hags, Yugoloth, or succubi. Their common physical traits might have a cadaverous appearance, they might look gaunt or even corpse-like, unearthly beauty, and eerie, fiendish features, which is in many ways open to you as a player how you might want to have those manifest. And then finally, we have infernal tieflings connected to Gehenna, the 9 hells, and Acheron's battlefields. They have devilish ancestry. So again, these are descended from the fiends that are much more lawful in nature. They like hierarchy, they like rules, they like infernal contracts. And their common physical traits will be horns, spines, often tails, maybe even golden eyes, and a sulfurous or smoky scent. That's the lore, of kind of very high overview of the lore behind Tieflings. So how is this represented mechanically? First of all, the kind of tail of the tape baseline features their humanoid creature type, which sits very much in line with all of the other playable species within the Player's Handbook. They are medium or small size. So if they're medium size, they stand about 4 to 7 feet tall, or they are small, standing at about 3 to 4 feet tall. And you get to choose this size when you select this species. So you could be a small, almost like imp-like tiefling, if you wanted to. And they have a speed of 30 feet, which is standard baseline speed. They are also in possession of dark vision. You can imagine the Abyss and the Nine Hells got many dark and dreary places in there. Tieflings have a dark vision to a range of 60 feet, so it's not as good as, say, dwarves or drow that are used to living underground, but their dark vision is of a significant range. They have an otherworldly presence, which means that if you play a Tiefling, you know the Thaumaturgy cantrip, which is a little bit like Prestidigitation in that it's small magical effects that you can do. The Thaumaturgy spell breaks down what those are, but this is more the religion-based Prestidigitation, if that makes sense. And when you cast it with the trait, you'd use the same spellcasting ability that you use for your Fiendish Legacy trait, which we're going to get to now. The Fiendish Legacy trait, because you are either a Abyssal, an Infernal, or a Chthonic Tiefling, you get to choose which one of those you are going to play as. And depending on which one you choose is going to give you a number of benefits, which we'll get to in a moment at a baseline. But when you reach levels 3 and 5, you also learn additional spells, which you always have prepared. So like a few of the species, such as elves and gnomes, if I remember correctly, some of these come with spells as part of the playing the species. And you unlock more of those when you hit level 3 and 5. And you get to cast those once without using a spell slot every day, and regain the ability to cast it once you finish a long rest. Of course, if you have spell slots, if you are playing a spellcasting class, such as a wizard, you can also tap into these spells using your spell slots as well. But even if you're not a spellcasting class, you will get to cast them at least once a day. Let's have a look at the legacies. So the Abyssal Legacy is going to give you, each one gives you a resistance as part of level 1, which obviously travels throughout the entirety of the game for you. If you're Abyssal, you have resistance to poison damage. If you're Chthonic, resistance to necrotic damage. And if you're Infernal, you have resistance to fire damage. Resistance meaning that essentially you're going to take half damage if you take any damage from that particular damage type. As an Abyssal Tiefling, you also know the Poison Spray cantrip at level 1, which allows you to essentially spray out some poison to some foes. When you hit level 3, you gain the Ray of Sickness, which is a ray spell which allows you to do necrotic damage, causing sickness. At level 5, you unlock Hold Person, which allows you to essentially paralyze a humanoid. If you are a Chthonic Tiefling, you're going to gain the Chill Touch cantrip, which is going to allow you to reach out and do necrotic damage. I'm pretty sure it's necrotic. Chill Touch, it is necrotic damage, yes. 1d10 necrotic damage. False Life at level 5, and you should have put this up on the screen really, is going to allow you to gain temporary hit points. Very nice. And then Ray of Enfeeblement, very cool spell at level 5, which allows you to basically, anybody that's particularly strong, you get to reduce their strength and weaken them a little bit in that regard. If you are an Infernal Tiefling, you gain the Firebolt cantrip, Hellish Rebuke, which is a great response to when somebody tries to attack you and just obliterating them. That is like a classic Tiefling ability. They try and hit you, and you set them on fire, basically. And then the Darkness spell at level 5, which is one of my... because it creates this dome, essentially, of magical darkness, which is more potent than normal darkness, because magical darkness can only be pierced by the most powerful magical light. So daylight would simply not be enough. And it's a great way. It functions like light, like the light spell does, so you can center it on an object. I would definitely, as a player, use the Darkness spell to get out of some very sticky situations and flee for my life, carrying the darkness with me. So yes, Darkness is a great spell, so you unlock that. So those are all of the Tiefling traits as they're presented mechanically. If you are playing a Tiefling, what are the questions that you can ask yourself about your character to make them stand out and feel uniquely Tiefling? First question, which is an obvious one, really, is what is the source of your Fiendish legacy? We know that obviously that you're going to have a Fiendish legacy, you would have chosen one, therefore whether you are descended from demons, devils, or evil fiends. But another important question for you to answer ultimately is, were you born in these lower planes, or are you just descended from demons, devils, or other fiends and just have ancestors that were connected to those planes? So were you born there or not? How do you feel about your fiendish heritage? Is this something that you embrace with pride? Are you a proud fiend? Or do you resent it as a curse? Do you lean into it, or do you reject it? Do you struggle with how others might perceive you because of that heritage? Fiends are, on a cosmological level, evil. Now, of course, you wouldn't be playing necessarily a devil or a demon, but you certainly have that heritage. This is something perhaps for you to talk with your dungeon master about, and the other players to see if these are things that they are happy to explore at the table, of course. Some tables will be happy to explore it, other tables won't be. You do what works for you as a collective. But if you are playing a tiefling, there is the very real possibility that the world in which this tiefling exists may not look too kindly upon those with fiendish blood. So is that a struggle for your character? And how does your fiendish legacy manifest? You have, obviously, either an abyssal, chthonic, or infernal tiefling, which means that you have abyssal, chthonic, or infernal tiefling traits. A good question for you to ask after you've created your character is, how do they shape your appearance? There are some suggestions in the player's handbook. How do these abilities manifest? And possibly your personality, which is a really interesting question, particularly when it comes to the abyssal, chthonic, or infernal tieflings more than anybody else, because, as I mentioned, demons are naturally chaotic, chthonic or kind of neutral fiends are neutral, and infernal devils are lawful. This could be a great way to, as a starting point, to simply select your alignment. If you're abyssal, perhaps you default to chaotic. Maybe that's not even a choice you need to make. Chthonic, neutral, and infernal, lawful. And then you can select whether or not they want to lean into evil, good, or neutral. So true neutral for chthonics, or chaotic neutral, or lawful neutral would be a good baseline, I think, for a tiefling as somebody that may or may not occasionally dip into the evil side of fiendish, but you may choose that they completely reject their fiendish ancestry and want to lean into good, and that is entirely your choice, of course, as well. So how do people react to your tiefling nature, and how do you respond? Again, this is something you're going to want to talk to your dungeon master about, and indeed the other players. It's an important question that any tiefling player should be thinking about, and indeed any DM who has a tiefling player at the table. Are they going to face fear and suspicion? Or could it be more curiosity and intrigue from those around? Again, that'll be based to some degree on the setting that you're in. And because of these emotional reactions, and let's be real, prejudice against tieflings, is this something that you're going to lean into to use to command respect from those? Because, again, depending on what your DM and your players want to do, but if there is fear and suspicion around a tiefling, perhaps that intimidating factor could be something that your character is going to use. That might help you to choose what skills you might want to be proficient in, of course, as well. Or is this something that you're going to try and hide? You may choose to go with stealth rather than intimidation, for example. So you can have that represented mechanically as well. So what drives you to adventure? This is generally a good question to ask of any player character that you're creating. Are you searching for wider acceptance? Is there an element of your fiendish ancestry that makes you seek power, perhaps, if that's something you're going to lean into? Are you going to seek redemption? Obviously, your ancestors will have probably committed multiversal atrocities. Perhaps this is something that you strive to break free from, and perhaps you wish to do good in order to break that cycle, that intergenerational cycle. Or are you simply seeking knowledge? Do you feel the pull of your fiendish lineage influencing your path as well? Perhaps there is hereditary desire for power. Maybe that's the powers of the lower planes manifesting in your personality, that though you might want to seek redemption equally, there is a part of you that feels a need for power. perhaps in order to achieve that redemption. You can get really complex with this stuff. I like Tieflings for exactly this reason. Perhaps using your wisdom, you want to seek to do good in the world. But there is something in you that feels that in order to do that good, you need more power first. So you're trying to achieve that through gaining power. Think of Gandalf when he's telling Frodo not to give him the ring. He says, I would use it for my desire to good, but through me, it would wield a power too great and terrible to imagine. And I think this perfect example could be a tiefling in that regard. How does your supernatural presence affect your interactions? So obviously the supernatural presence is represented through thaumaturgy, which, in fact, let me have a quick rundown for you of what thaumaturgy does, because it is different from prestidigitation. But I think when I read these out, if you're not familiar with the spell, I think it will give you a good idea as to exactly how you could use this. So you can alter the appearance of your eyes for a minute. You can create a booming voice. You can cause flames to flicker, brighten, dim, or change color for a minute. You can instantly cause an unlocked door or window to fly open or slam shut. You can create an instantaneous sound that originates from the point of your choice within range, such as a rumble of thunder, the cry of a raven, or ominous spirits. And you can cause harmless tremors in the ground for a minute. All of these are great little touches that you can have to your tiefling. And I think if you think about any sort of social interaction or anything like that, utilizing the thaumaturgy cantrip, because it doesn't cost you anything to do, you can think about how you can manifest that infernal, or rather a demonic, fiendish presence of your tiefling quite easily, not even just through appearance, but for the effect of the environment around them. So do you use that to intimidate people, to impress people, or perhaps to amuse them? And because you have a natural ability with magic, thaumaturgy, and other spells that you get, as we've discussed, does that impact the role that you're going to have in the party? And obviously that will be dependent slightly on which legacy you've chosen. And obviously that latter part is something you're going to want to talk perhaps to your fellow players about as part of session 0. What is your relationship with the lower planes? Do you perhaps hear whispers from fiendish ancestors? Do you feel drawn to dark forces? Or do you actively reject any influence from them? The thing I like about tieflings as a species, and I do enjoy them a lot, is that this allows you to have that kind of relationship that a warlock has with their patron without having to play a warlock. So there is a very real possibility, and it gives the DM loads to play with, because there is a very real possibility that these conversations are being had between the fiends of the lower planes and the player character. This may very well be something that you're going to want to put into your backstory, just to give the dungeon master a little bit of a nugget to say, oh yeah, they occasionally hear whispers from their demonic ancestors. That's the sort of nugget that a DM loves, because it doesn't say too much, but you're basically giving the DM permission to say, yep, torment my character with whispers from the lower planes, for example. And if you wanted to go into detail in your backstory, you could perhaps talk about how they may manifest, but it gives the DM a toy to play with to further reel your character in to the campaign and the world. What emotions or desires burn strongest within you? Do you feel an unnatural urge for power, knowledge, or even destruction? And the three of these, I picked these 3 words because I think each one could apply to a different legacy. So power being your infernal legacy, knowledge being your chthonic legacy, or destruction being your demonic legacy. Or you can mix and match them however you like. Or do you defy those expectations and follow a path of kindness and heroism? Which, again, I've talked about a little bit earlier in this video, but I think that should be some food for thought for you to further kind of cement the personality of this character. Do you have a connection to any deities or cosmic forces? Do you worship an entity from the lower planes? A god who accepts outcasts, perhaps, would be a great one for a tiefling. Or do you reject divine influence altogether? So the question is, does your tiefling worship somebody who is more a fiend, a god, or I don't want anybody telling me what to do because I've seen or I've heard from my family exactly what happens when you let your fate be dictated by a higher power, whether that be a god or a demon, or indeed one that sits in both. Lolth, for example, being a fiendish god that she is, the demon queen. And again, another good question to ask of any player character, but what is your ultimate goal? Are you seeking to carve out your own destiny away from the infernal or fiendish legacy that you have? Are you looking to go a separate way? Or perhaps your character wasn't born in the lower planes and has just descended from a fiend, and perhaps you want to uncover how that came to be and what happened, because perhaps that story has been lost. Going back to this theme of a desire for power, perhaps you look to rise to power and to try and reshape the world in a way that your character feels is more in line with what they desire and what they believe would be a greater world, however that may choose to manifest. So those are the questions for playing a tiefling and trying to bring out the lore of a tiefling in your roleplay. As always, one of the techniques that we as professional actors use is asking these sorts of questions, because once you have answers to these questions, these are then going to be able to influence your decisions. These questions are something that you can refer to. I did a recent video about checklists that players can go through before they start playing a game of D&D, and these are questions that you can go through before every session, look at what your answers were and go, okay, I want to bring that to the fore this session. So even if you only focus on one question each session, okay, this session I'm going to make sure that I use thaumaturgy at every possibility. So when I walk into the tavern, have all the candles and lanterns go out as soon as I walk in, just to unsettle everyone. Things like that is really going to elevate your character. So just answering these questions and focusing on those answers during a session can really make a huge difference. I've done all of videos on all of the other species in the 2024 Player's Handbook as well. I may go into some more detail on some of the subspecies, such as a video dedicated to a chthonic tiefling in future, but there is a playlist that I will link to with all of the videos on all of the species from the 2024 Player's Handbook, and also there will be a link below this video on YouTube where you can go over to our Patreon. You don't have to pay anything, it'll be available for free. You can just download a worksheet if you wanted to print that out and scribble some notes on there if you want to have something written out that you can scribble on. So yeah, so that will be available over on our Patreon, but there'll be a link at the bottom of this video. If you did enjoy this video, if you did appreciate it, I would really appreciate you hitting that thumbs up. And also, if you want more videos like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button and perhaps even the bell icon so you don't miss any of our videos here on the Bardic Quest YouTube channel. Yes, that's it on Tiefling. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.